Postmodernism emerged in the mid-20th century as a response to the established norms and conventions of modernism. It is characterized by its skepticism toward grand narratives and ideologies that claim to offer a singular, objective truth about the world. Postmodernists argue that truth is not an absolute, fixed entity but rather a construct influenced by cultural, social, and historical contexts. At the heart of postmodern thought is the concept of deconstruction, a term popularized by the French philosopher Jacques Derrida. Deconstruction challenges the idea that words and texts have inherent meanings. Instead, it suggests that meaning is always deferred and contingent, relying on an interplay of differences within language. This perspective undermines the notion of stable, definitive interpretations, encouraging readers and thinkers to question and reinterpret texts endlessly. Postmodernism also emphasizes the fragmented and multifaceted nature of reality. In contrast to modernism, which often seeks coherence and unity, postmodernism embraces paradox, ambiguity, and plurality. This outlook is evident in various fields, including literature, art, architecture, and philosophy. Postmodern literature, for instance, often employs metafiction, self-referentiality, and pastiche, blending different styles and genres to highlight the constructed nature of narratives. In art, postmodernism rejects the rigid boundaries that separate high art from popular culture. Artists like Andy Warhol blurred these distinctions by incorporating mass-produced images and commercial techniques into their works. Warhol's Campbell's soup cans and Marilyn Monroe portraits challenge traditional notions of originality and artistic genius, suggesting that art can be found in everyday objects and media representations. Postmodern architecture, too, breaks away from the functionalist and minimalist principles of modernism. Architects such as Robert Venturi and Frank Gehry embrace eclecticism, ornamentation, and historical references, creating buildings that are playful, ironic, and visually diverse. This architectural approach reflects a broader postmodern sensibility that values heterogeneity and complexity over uniformity and simplicity. In philosophy, postmodernism questions the Enlightenment ideals of reason, progress, and universalism. Thinkers like Michel Foucault and Jean-François Lyotard argue that knowledge and power are intertwined, shaping and limiting our understanding of the world. Foucault's concept of the archaeology of knowledge examines how discourses and institutions construct and regulate knowledge, revealing the power dynamics that underlie seemingly objective truths. Lyotard's notion of the incredulity toward metanarratives encapsulates the postmodern skepticism toward overarching theories that claim to explain all aspects of human experience. Instead, Lyotard advocates for a recognition of petits récits, or small narratives, which honor the diversity of individual and localized perspectives. This shift from universal to particular narratives acknowledges the multiplicity of human experiences and resists the imposition of a single dominant viewpoint. Postmodernism's influence extends to the realm of politics and identity. The movement challenges traditional categories and binaries, such as male-female, black or white, and gay-straight, emphasizing the fluid and constructed nature of identities. This perspective has been instrumental in the development of various critical theories, including feminist theory, queer theory, and postcolonial theory. Feminist theorists like Judith Butler argue that gender is not a fixed biological essence but a performative act, repeatedly enacted and reinforced through cultural norms and practices. Butler's concept of gender performativity deconstructs the binary opposition between male and female, highlighting the ways in which gender identities are socially constructed and maintained. Queer theory builds on these ideas, critiquing the heteronormative assumptions that underlie traditional understandings of sexuality and identity. Queer theorists challenge the notion of stable, coherent sexual identities, advocating for a more fluid and inclusive understanding of sexual and gender diversity. This approach resonates with the postmodern emphasis on plurality and resistance to fixed categories. Postcolonial theory, too, draws on postmodern insights to examine the lasting impacts of colonialism and the ways in which colonial discourses shape contemporary identities and power structures. Thinkers like Edward Said and Homi K. Bhabha explore how colonialism's cultural legacy continues to influence the construction of knowledge and identity, calling for a decolonization of thought and practice. In the realm of media and Jean Baudrillard's concept of hyperreality suggests that in a media-saturated world, distinctions between the real and the simulated become increasingly blurred. According to Baudrillard, contemporary society is characterized by the proliferation of signs and images that no longer refer to any tangible reality but instead create their own self-referential systems. This phenomenon is evident in the rise of digital media and virtual reality, where representations can become more vivid and convincing than the physical world they purport to depict. The internet and social media platforms further complicate the notion of authenticity, as individuals curate and perform their identities in mediated spaces, often blurring the lines between reality and fiction. Postmodernism's critical stance toward established norms and hierarchies also manifests in its approach to education and pedagogy. Traditional educational models, which prioritize standardized knowledge and hierarchical teacher-student relationships, are challenged by postmodern pedagogical approaches that emphasize dialogue, collaboration, and the co-construction of knowledge. Educators like Paulo Freire advocate for a pedagogy of the oppressed, which seeks to empower marginalized groups by fostering critical consciousness and challenging oppressive structures. In the realm of science and technology, postmodernism raises questions about the objectivity and neutrality of scientific knowledge. Critics argue that scientific practices and discourses are influenced by social, cultural, and political factors, calling for a more reflexive and context-sensitive approach to scientific inquiry. This perspective aligns with the broader postmodern critique of universal truths and highlights the contingent and situated nature of knowledge production. Despite its significant contributions, postmodernism has faced criticism from various quarters. Some argue that its relativistic stance leads to a form of nihilism, undermining the possibility of meaningful action and engagement. Critics like Jürgen Habermas contend that postmodernism's skepticism toward universal principles and rational discourse risks eroding the foundations of democratic society. Others point to the potential for postmodernism to be co-opted by capitalist and consumerist ideologies. The celebration of diversity, fragmentation, and pluralism can be commodified and repurposed to serve market interests, diluting the critical edge of postmodern thought. This critique highlights the tension between postmodernism's emancipatory aspirations and its susceptibility to appropriation by dominant power structures. Despite these challenges, postmodernism continues to offer valuable insights into the complexities and contradictions of contemporary life. Its emphasis on deconstructing established truths and embracing multiplicity encourages a more nuanced and critical engagement with the world. By questioning the assumptions and biases that underpin our understanding of reality, postmodernism opens up new possibilities for thinking, creating, and living. In sum, postmodernism represents a profound shift in how we conceptualize truth and reality. Its deconstructive approach challenges the idea of fixed meanings and stable identities, emphasizing the contingent and constructed nature of all forms of knowledge. Through its influence on literature, art, architecture, philosophy, politics, and beyond, postmodernism invites us to embrace complexity, ambiguity, and diversity, fostering a more critical and inclusive worldview.